This video is an audio overview generated by Google NotebookLM, based on an article I, QuietBeef, posted on my blog QuietBeef on December 23, 2021, titled QuietBeef Uses His Love of Hon-Kure as a pretext to push political opinions. It's nothing more than a trivial piece written by an ordinary person about 50 ago, but perhaps it might be interesting to pause for a moment and recall what the social media landscape was like just 5 years ago. Voice of God. Old people are always looking back at the past, aren't they? QuietBeef. Cowface. The link to the original article is in the description, written in Japanese.
Imagine walking into a quaint, cozy little neighborhood coffee shop. You order a vanilla latte, and then you suddenly realize that the back door of the cafe leads directly into a massive, intensely heated underground political rally.
That is quite the mental image. Sounds a bit terrifying, honestly.
Right. Well, that is exactly the kind of whiplash we are dealing with today in this deep dive. We're looking at a blog post from 2021 that starts out as this incredibly detailed love letter to a Japanese YouTube trio. And somehow, through a really wild but completely logical progression, it ends up smack in the middle of Donald Trump and the American culture wars.
It really is a remarkable piece of writing. And, what makes it so compelling is the author himself. He goes by the pen name Mok-Guiyuu.
Which translates to what again?
It loosely translates to quiet beef.
Quiet beef. I love that so much.
Right. And his perspective is just inherently cross-cultural. He's a Japanese citizen, but he's lived in the United States for 30 years as a legal permanent resident.
Wow, 30 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time to observe a culture.
Exactly. And he even operates under this motto derived from Socrates, which is, I know that I know nothing. So he approaches everything from internet pop culture to presidential politics with this deeply philosophical, observational lens.
Which means we aren't just looking at, a casual diary entry here. We are unpacking a very deliberate thesis.
Oh, absolutely.
Our mission today is to explore how this seemingly straightforward fandom post unexpectedly unravels into a massive, intense commentary on big tech censorship, political correctness, and, the broader architecture of free speech.
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground.
It really does.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We're going to go from musical analogies about YouTubers' vocal cords all the way to everyday American Christmas greetings, all in one single train of thought.
And we have the benefit of looking back at this text from the vantage point of 2026 because, Mok-Guiyuu wrote this about 5 years ago, making some incredibly bold predictions about where the internet was heading.
Right, back in 2021.
Yeah, so we actually get to see whether his theories about digital migration and cultural suppression held true over time.
That's a great point. But before we get into the heavy political themes, we really have to understand what Mok-Guiyuu is so afraid of losing in the first place.
We need the context.
Exactly. We need to establish the specific catalyst for this entire essay. So he is a massive fan of a YouTube channel known in its community as Hon-Kure.
Right.
Now, just to give you some context, Hon-Kure is a channel featuring 3 women, but it didn't start out that way. It originally began as a duo with 2 creators named Susan and Mary Ten.
Which is a dynamic that is just notoriously difficult to maintain. Anyone who studies digital creator ecosystems knows that group channels are incredibly fragile.
Oh yeah, it's lightning in a bottle.
Exactly. The chemistry is so hard to sustain.
And when Susan got married and stepped back, Mary Ten brought in 2 entirely new members, Sumu-chan and Toko, to make it a trio.
Which is usually a death sentence for a channel.
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
When a core member leaves a highly personality-driven channel, the vibe permanently shifts, the audience revolts, and the channel just slowly bleeds subscribers. But Mok-Guiyuu points out that the quality of Hon-Kure actually elevated. He attributes this entirely to Mary Ten's leadership and her ability to manage complex human relationships.
He even notes that highly capable corporate executives often fail at this specific kind of interpersonal dynamic.
Right. And he credits Mary Ten with maintaining what he calls a gachi no wacha can.
Yes, the gachi no wacha can, which translates to a real, genuine, messy dynamic.
Messy in a good way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that phrase is crucial for understanding the appeal of Hon-Kure. He's making this sharp distinction between the fake, overly produced, sterile camaraderie you see on highly monetized influencer channels.
Oh, where everything is heavily scripted and edited.
Right, compared to the authentic, slightly chaotic, unscripted friction that Hon-Kure achieved. The content wasn't polished, it was a bit edgy, highly conversational, and it just felt incredibly real.
And his description of this dynamic gets wonderfully hyper-specific, particularly regarding how these three women actually sound together.
Yes, his focus on the audio is fascinating.
It is. Because Mok-Guiyuu describes himself as having audio dominance. He experiences and processes the world very heavily through sound, much more so than through visuals.
Interesting.
So he doesn't just say they have a nice rapport, he breaks Mariten's voice down like he's a classical composer analyzing a symphony.
It is an incredibly vivid breakdown. I mean, he describes Mariten's voice as having this nasal tone that resonates perfectly in the nasal cavity, wrapped softly in a rich, low-end frequency.
Yeah, and then he uses this wild musical analogy. He says their combined vocal dynamic is like a flute and a tenor sax playing a subtone in an octave unison.
Wow.
And then, on top of that, with a clarinet harmonizing a perfect fifth right in the middle, well, you can practically hear the jazz club in his description.
It's so poetic, but, beyond just being poetic, why go to such lengths to describe the acoustic properties of a YouTube video?
Right, why does it matter?
Well, it reveals the mechanics of intimacy in digital media. Think about how you consume podcasts or YouTube videos.
Often with headphones on.
Exactly. You often have these creators literally inside your head through earbuds while you are commuting or doing dishes or falling asleep. It is an inherently intimate parasocial medium.
That makes a lot of sense.
By describing their vocal harmony as a flawless chamber music recital, Mok-Guiyuu is demonstrating the deep, almost subconscious sensory investment users have with their favorite creators. This isn't just casual entertainment for him.
No, it's an auditory sanctuary that brings him immense comfort.
Precisely.
But the problem with building a perfect, delicate chamber music trio on someone else's stage is that the stage owner can turn off the lights at any time.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that perfect harmony gets completely shattered, not because Hon-Kure had a scandal or, lost their audience, but because of the platform itself.
This is the disruption of the sanctuary, and it initiates the sudden, jarring shift in his blog post.
So Hon-Kure, despite their popularity and this really deep audience connection, started facing massive moderation actions on social media.
It was out of nowhere.
Pretty much. Mok-Guiyuu notes that because their content had this authentic, unscripted, and slightly edgy appeal to it, they started getting hit with algorithmic penalties across all networks.
Right. The algorithm doesn't do nuance.
Exactly. It got so severe that on YouTube, the moment they would turn on the camera for a live stream, they would be hit with an instant ban.
Not a warning, not a demonetization flag, an immediate automated shutdown mid-broadcast.
That is so wild.
It is the reality of algorithmic moderation. Platforms use automated bots scanning for specific keywords, vocal intonations, or visual cues. If the algorithm flags you, the context of your conversation doesn't matter at all. The plug is pulled instantly.
So to survive, the creators had to move their core operations off of the massive public square of YouTube. They moved on to a paid Japanese platform called DMM.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah. And when they announced this, they jokingly told their YouTube audience, and this quote is just brilliant, they said, "We aren't disbanding, you are."
Wow. It's a very dark, very clever joke.
It really is.
Because the platform's rules didn't dissolve the creator group. The rules dissolved the community that had gathered around them. The audience was the entity being forcibly disbanded.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because Mok-Guiyuu uses a highly relatable analogy to explain what he thinks is happening to the internet here.
I love this analogy.
He compares major digital platforms to a school run by overly strict, authoritarian disciplinary teachers. You have the alluring, slightly edgy students. You have the clever students who challenge the teacher's ideology. And as these unconventional students gain popularity and attract a crowd, the school just keeps making the rules stricter and stricter, resulting in mass expulsions.
It's the life cycle of almost every major social network. They start out wild and free to attract a massive user base, relying on edge cases and controversial creators to drive engagement.
Right, and
Then, once they're huge, they sanitize everything to appease corporate advertisers, kicking out the very people who built the culture.
Wait, I want to push back on Mok-Guiyuu's framing here for a second.
Yeah.
If a platform is essentially a private business, they have advertisers to please, right? They have terms of service.
Sure.
So isn't this just basic brand safety? Why does Mok-Guiyuu view this as some malicious ideological censorship rather than just a corporation trying to keep its site advertiser-friendly?
That is the pivotal friction point of the entire essay. Mok-Guiyuu completely rejects the brand safety argument. He believes that the application of these rules is entirely asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical how?
Well, Any ecologist will tell you that if you constantly remove the edge cases from an environment, you create a monoculture. And monocultures are fragile, sterile, and ultimately boring.
Oh, that makes sense.
Mok-Guiyuu argues that the strict school isn't punishing everyone equally for the sake of advertisers. He believes they are selectively enforcing vague rules to engineer a specific ideological monoculture.
Wow. And he predicted that a public school acting like this would eventually see its enrollment numbers plummet.
He did.
Back in 2021, Mok-Guiyuu made a pretty bold prediction. He said this heavy-handed digital discipline would inevitably lead to segregation or habitat isolation.
A digital migration, essentially.
Right. He predicted creators would abandon the major free platforms and migrate to digital private schools, places like DMM and Nikoniko.
Which, for those unfamiliar, are essentially Japan's answers to Patreon and YouTube mixed together. They offer paid, gated content ecosystems without the draconian algorithms.
Exactly. He predicted people would flee to these paid platforms or places like Netflix and WWL just to find a place where they could speak freely.
And looking at this from our perspective in 2026, his prediction of habitat isolation was remarkably prescient.
It really was spot on.
The internet has fundamentally fragmented. YouTube, for many edgy, political, or even just slightly unconventional creators, is no longer the main stage.
It's just a billboard now.
Exactly. It is merely a sanitized, highly regulated storefront used solely as a gateway to funnel viewers to external paid platforms where the real unmuted content actually lives.
He framed this not just as a channel update for Hon-Kure, but as a forced digital migration. People were having to physically pack up their digital bags and leave the territory to find a new world.
A massive shift in how we interact online.
And that forced migration leads Mok-Guiyuu to turn his anger directly toward the entities he views as the landlords of the internet big tech. This is where the blog post takes a very sharp turn from analyzing platform mechanics into intense political commentary.
The transition from discussing the...
The source material deals with highly charged political themes. We are not endorsing, nor are we taking sides on any of the political claims he makes here. We are simply mapping out his argument and the philosophical ideas he laid out in the text.
A necessary distinction because Mok-Guiyuu's frustration with these companies, specifically GAFA, so Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and the leadership of Twitter at the time, is profound.
He's not holding back.
Not at all. He views them not as impartial service providers, but as dictatorial lords ruling over digital fiefdoms.
He is furious. I mean, he cites a very specific example to justify his anger, pulling a quoted tweet regarding President Joe Biden. Mok-Guiyuu claims that YouTube was actively manipulating the public metrics on Biden's videos. According to the claim he cites, the platform was intentionally hiding the massive number of dislikes on these videos while artificially inflating the likes.
The numbers he mentions are staggering.
Yeah, alleging that a live broadcast with only 5,000 active viewers suddenly jumped to 500,000 likes.
For Mok-Guiyuu, this represents a terrifying shift. He isn't just complaining about a bad algorithm anymore. He views this as the platform intentionally putting its thumb on the scale to engineer a false consensus.
Yes, he compares it to a teacher's pet scenario. To help visualize how Mok-Guiyuu perceives this manipulation, it's not like simply playing at a rigged casino.
Right.
Think of it more like trying to have a debate in a massive public square. But the landlord who owns the square has secretly given one side megaphones while trapping the other side inside soundproof glass.
That is a terrifying image.
It is. You can still see the people in the glass talking, moving their mouths, so it looks like free speech is happening, but their reach has been completely artificially muted.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Mok-Guiyuu has a deeper and admittedly highly controversial theory about the origin of this behavior.
Oh, this is the cultural theory he brings up.
Yes. He questions the cultural backgrounds of the leaders running these tech monopolies. He theorizes that this specific flavor of censorship stems from tech leaders who are educated under authoritarian regimes, like the Chinese Communist Party, or raised within rigid social hierarchies, like the Indian caste system.
Wow.
And he calls the combination of these influences with globalist corporate power a devil's blending.
A devil's blending. That is an incredibly loaded, heavy phrase.
Highly loaded. But it reveals how systemic he believes the rot is. He doesn't see platform censorship as a glitch in the American ideal of free speech. He sees it as an invasion of incompatible cultural values being forced upon the digital public square.
So he thinks the system is basically unfixable from within.
Exactly. And because he sees the system as fundamentally compromised, his solution isn't to try and vote the tech leaders out or write petitions or complain to customer support.
Right.
His solution is what he literally calls a peasant revolt, or in Japanese, haikushu iki.
Haikushu iki.
Yeah.
This concept is fascinating. He says, let's leave the territory of the bad lords. Because historically, a peasant revolt in feudal Japan wasn't always a violent mob storming the castle with pitchforks. Often, it took the form of chosen, or absconding.
Just leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Entire villages of peasants would silently pack up in the middle of the night and mass migrate to a neighboring domain, effectively destroying the abusive lord's tax base and labor force.
It is the ultimate form of decentralized protest. He is calling for a mass exodus, urging everyday users and creators to abandon the big tech platforms entirely and seek out a dream new land where they aren't treated with such arbitrary cruelty.
It's exactly what Hon-Kure did when they moved to DMM.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the final and perhaps most poignant transition in his post. Mok-Guiyuu doesn't just leave this as a problem confined to server farms and digital terms of service.
He brings it into the real world.
He does. He takes this concept of the digital public square and seamlessly maps it onto the physical public square. He shows how the algorithmic censorship he sees online perfectly mirrors the psychological self-censorship he experiences in everyday American life.
This is where his 30 years of living in the United States really comes into play. He is observing American cultural shifts with the distance of a philosopher, but the proximity of a resident.
Keep in mind the date of this post. He's writing this on December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve. So the holidays are very much on his mind as he types.
Right.
And he transitions into lamenting the political correctness that, in his view, forced everyday Americans for years to say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas.
It is a classic hallmark of the American culture wars, but instead of tackling it as a cable news talking point, he grounds it in a very physical, personal anecdote about his own neighborhood.
He talks about the receptionists and staff at the condo building where he lives. He observes that for years they would say, Happy Holidays to everyone passing through the lobby, but they always looked gloomy or uncomfortable doing it.
Like it felt highly unnatural to them.
Exactly. But then, he notes, when Donald Trump became president and publicly, openly told his supporters it was okay to say Merry Christmas again, the change in his condo lobby was palpable.
The receptionists were transformed.
He says they were overjoyed. They started saying Merry Christmas with genuine happiness and relief. Now, Mok-Guiyuu clarifies that these receptionists still used basic human discretion. They didn't say it to Jewish or Islamic residents out of mutual respect. But the point he's making is about permission.
Right, the feeling of being allowed.
Yes. He observes that Trump essentially unmuted a phrase that people desperately wanted to say, but felt societal pressure to swallow.
To really understand what Mok-Guiyuu is highlighting here, we have to look at a sociological concept known as preference falsification.
Preference falsification, what is that exactly?
It's a term coined by the economist Hon-Kure. It describes a situation where people publicly support a social norm or a statement that they privately despise simply because they believe everyone else expects them to. They falsify their preference to avoid social punishment.
Think about your own digital habits for a second. Have you ever typed out a comment on a YouTube video or a post on social media, suddenly thought about the community guidelines or how your peers might react, and just hit backspace?
I think we all have.
You deleted it before you even posted it. That is preference falsification in action. That is the exact micro-level self-censorship Mok-Guiyuu is talking about.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive exploring a Japanese blog post, analyzing the subtle, jazz-like vocal harmonies of a YouTube trio called Hon-Kure.
Right.
And we ended up with a philosophical examination of Donald Trump, the suppression of American holiday greetings, and the architecture of free speech.
This raises an important question. What is the underlying thread connecting a YouTube live stream ban to a condo receptionist's morning greeting?
It seems like a stretch at first.
But the unifying theme is the deep existential fear of the unauthentic self. When Hon-Kure gets their live stream instantly banned on YouTube, their genuine messy dynamic is being muted. When a user deletes their comment out of fear of an algorithm, they're being muted. And when a receptionist forces out a sterile Happy Holidays they don't want to say to appease polite society, they're actively muting their authentic selves.
Mok-Guiyuu is absolutely terrified of a world where people are structurally forced to hide their true voices.
He even reflects on the timeline, noting that 2021 was the first Christmas since Trump had left the White House. He wonders out loud, are people going back to muting themselves?
Right. Are they going to retreat back into preference falsification because the cultural pressure is returning?
Exactly. He fundamentally refuses to respect a society that forces that kind of suppression on basic, everyday human habits.
His anger at the end of the post is visceral. He warns that this kind of suppression, whether it is buried deep inside the proprietary algorithms of big tech or manifesting out on the sidewalks of American society, simply cannot last forever.
They'd have to crack eventually.
Forcing people to swallow their words, whether through digital bans or cultural shaming, inevitably leads to a breaking point. A peasant revolt always follows the overreach of the lords.
It is a remarkably heavy, powerful conclusion to what initially presented itself as a simple fan letter.
It really takes you on a journey.
So let's take a breath and trace the path we just walked. We started by exploring Mok-Guiyuu's deep auditory love for the channel Hon-Kure.
Yeah.
We learned how his audio dominance allowed him to appreciate the perfect, woodwind-like harmony of three distinct creators, generating a genuine, messy dynamic that felt like a sanctuary.
We then explored the mechanics of how that sanctuary was destroyed,
Wow.
how algorithmic instant bans and shadow banning acted as a strict school, creating a fragile monoculture and forcing a digital migration.
Right, a migration that resulted in the segregated internet we see today in 2026, where YouTube is just a gateway to the real content on DMM or Nikoniko.
From there, we looked at his intense criticism of big tech leaders. We explored how he views them as corrupt feudal lords manipulating the public square with soundproof glass and megaphones.
And his subsequent call for a digital peasant revolt, a mass absconding from the major platforms. And finally, we saw how that digital silencing translated seamlessly into the physical world, exploring the sociology of preference falsification through his anecdote about the simple relief of being allowed to say Merry Christmas without fear of cultural backlash.
Which perfectly illustrates why unpacking a text like this is so incredibly valuable. It proves that the micro and the macro are inseparable.
They really are.
The way we consume our everyday pop culture, our favorite podcasts, our online entertainment, it is all inextricably linked to massive global debates about who controls the architecture of speech, who writes the algorithms, and who gets to decide what is acceptable to say.
It really is all connected. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Mok-Guiyuu cherished the unique, diverse harmony of voices on that YouTube channel. The flute, the sax, the clarinet, all playing together in beautiful friction.
Right.
But if our digital worlds and our physical spaces continue to rigidly segregate, if everyone just packs up and retreats to their own private, paid platforms and their own ideological echo chambers to avoid the strict rules of the public square,
Then what happens?
will we eventually lose the ability to hear the harmonies of people who think completely differently than we do?
If the school only keeps the students who all sound exactly the same, you don't have a harmony anymore. You just have a single, deafeningly monotonous note.
Exactly. Something to think about the next time you type out a comment and wonder if you should hit delete. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.